ready when you are. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this joint Audit and Standards Committee. I am Councillor Dave Muller and I am chairing the meeting today. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons in the chamber and in the social areas. Please ensure that you wear a mask unless when you are moving around the building. Once you have taken your seat, you may remove your mask. Please ensure that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please maintain social distance at all times during the meeting and during any breaks. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. That you do not interrupt other speakers. That if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and or for training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'd now like to make some introductions. The officers attending the meeting today are Emily Yule, the Monitoring Officer. Good morning, Emily. Catherine Steele, Assistant Director for Corporate Resources. Good morning, Catherine. Melissa Evans, Corporate Manager for Finance and Commissioning and Procurement. Good morning, Melissa. And Mandy Smith, the Governance Officer. Good morning, Mandy. Can I now move to the agenda, please? Can we have item 1, apologies for absence or any substitutions? Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Lindsay and apologies from Councillor Caston, who is being substituted by Councillor Ekpeng-Yong. And we have Councillor Nunn, Amoroson and Warboys not in attendance.
Thank you very much. Item number 2. Do we have any declarations of interest from any members present, please? No, thank you very much. Item 3, I'd like to move on to the minutes of the meeting, JSAC 21-1, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of May 2021. These are all in your papers on pages 5 to 12, and we're actually looking for accuracy, etc. on these. Does anyone have any questions about the accuracy or any other issues with the minutes? Councillor McLaren, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 7, 36.2, at our last meeting, I asked or requested some more information about the performance and where those areas were lacking in or below standard of performance and where there was scope for improvement, and I don't remember I've had a response to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor McLaren.
So I've received that information this morning, Councillor McLaren, so I forward that on to everybody after the meeting.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Thank you, Mary. Are there any other issues with the minutes on that meeting? In which case, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please, for those minutes? Proposed by Councillor Hurren, seconded by Councillor Norris. Thank you very much. We'd like to go to the vote, and could I ask Mandy, please, to conduct?
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to go to the modern.gov app, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Ekpeng-Yong, can I take your vote? 4. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous. 6 votes for.
Thank you very much. scheme. Do we have any, please?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 5, do we have any questions from the public?
None received.
Thank you. And item 6, do we have any questions from councillors?
None received.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Therefore, we'll move on to item number 7. This is the JAC 21/2, the Treasury Management Outturn Report for 2020-21. And can I please ask Melissa Evans to present the report, please? Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So this is the Joint Treasury Management Report covering the position for the outturn for the financial year 2020-21. It provides details of performance, effects of decisions taken during that period, and confirms compliance with the Council's Treasury Management Policy. The report explains in more details the factors affecting the strategy and activities, including the regulatory framework, economic conditions, interest rate and liquidity risk. The COVID pandemic dominated last year and the impacts of the global lockdown. The start of the financial year saw many central banks cutting interest rates as lockdown caused economic activity to grind to a halt. The UK government provided a range of fiscal stimulus measures, the size of which has not been seen in peacetime. The vaccine approval and subsequent rollout programme are both positives for the financial services sector in general, but there remains much uncertainty around the level of losses that banks and building societies will suffer due to the economic slowdown. The Bank of England held the bank rate at 0.1% throughout the year, but extended its quantitative easing programme by 150 billion to 895 billion in November 2020. The UK unemployment rate was 5% in the 3 months to January 2021, and unemployment is still expected to increase as various government job support schemes come to an end. Inflation has remained low over the 12-month period, and the latest figures show the annual headline rate of UK consumer price inflation, otherwise known as CPI, fell to 0.4% year-on-year in February, well below expectations of 0.8% and further below the Bank of England's target of 2%. Moving on to specifically for our two councils, both councils were able to take advantage of holding additional cash from the government grant schemes received during the year relating to COVID until they were paid out to support local businesses. This has obviously increased the Treasury activity during the year. Regarding banking activities, both councils operated within daily bank accounts limits, and each council has increased its short-term debt, Baber by 15.5 million and Mid Suffolk by 19.6 million. Each council lent a further 19.3 million to Sifco Limited, and Mid Suffolk lent further 600,000 to Gateway 14 Limited. All investment activities undertaken were in accordance with the approved counterparty list. The Council's investment activities, including average returns, can be found at Appendix C of the report. Investments by both councils in Funding Circle has reduced as unallocated funds have been reclaimed and existing loans repaid. For Baber, this was 48,000 of the 214k previously invested, and for Mid Suffolk it was 53,000 of the 215,000 invested, leaving the balances at the 31st of March of 166,000 for Baber and 162,000 for Mid Suffolk. Both councils are compliant with the upper limits for interest rate exposure. The investment activity undertaken for the year was done so in priority order of security and liquidity over yield as prescribed in the Treasury Management Strategy. And finally, I just want to draw members' attention to an error in Appendix C, paragraph 1.4, table 4, and that's on page 24. In the Mid Suffolk table, there's two figures in the 31st of March 21 column. The balances have been transposed, so the CCLA balance should read 5 million, not 2 million, and the Investec balance should read 2 million, not 5 million. I can confirm there's been no changes in either of the amounts invested in these funds. And the figures for Baber in the table are correct. Finally, if anyone's got any questions, Catherine or myself are here to answer them. Thank you.
Does any member have any questions for Melissa on the paper, please? Councillor McLaren?
Thank you, Chair. 4.7, Melissa, where there's a difference between the interest rate applied to the long-term borrowing, different in both councils. What is the impact of that? That's page 15.
Sorry, can we just check the page number? It's just in our pack.
No, mine's not. 15. Oh, 15. 1.5. Oh, 1.5. Sorry, that was probably my mistake. 1.5. 4.7.
Is it in one of the particular appendices? Because I think page 15 in this pack is the end of the report itself. Is there is it an appendix? Sorry.
Oh, is it not? Oh, do you mean?
Is it Appendix A, Councillor McLaren?
No, it's in the main presentation document.
It's 4.7. Should be the same.
Now that is interesting, isn't it?
Page 12.
Page 13.
Yes, it is.
Is that big? Oh.
Yeah, I think actually it might be a little bit more helpful, Councillor McLaren, if you have a look on page 20, it might give you a little bit more information in a table format, because we show the long-term and the short-term borrowing. Now, the reason for the long-term borrowing between Baber and Mid Suffolk, the 3.19 and the 3.07, I assume those are the same numbers in the table that you're referring to, that's the PWLB borrowing relating to the council housing stock. So at the time when we borrowed, they were obviously different officers in charge of those decisions at the time, so they were...
It's historical.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I haven't matched up the page, but never mind. I'll look at that afterwards.
It goes back when we had to force to buy our own house, so the borrow. It's our stock, we have to borrow money.
Thank you. And I've just one sort of just comment. A lot of the impact has been about the high level of unemployment that's in part of your report. Is that because at the moment we see a mismatch between a high level of unemployment, but many companies can't recruit? Is that something that might impact us, or?
But I can try and answer that one, Councillor. I don't think it should impact our Treasury management activity. Obviously, it might have other impacts on the two councils, but in terms of our Treasury management activity, I don't think it will have a direct impact.
No, I wasn't suggesting perhaps it had an impact on the Treasury management, but it might have an impact on overall on the council itself. Yeah.
Yes, certainly, and the people on the council tax reduction scheme as well, we might see an increase in people claiming that as well. Certainly universal credit claimants have gone up a lot over the last 18 months, and with the furlough scheme ending, that could go up further again.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Question?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, on page 24, table 4, the movement in the CCLA amount, has that ended up in the Investec fund? Or is that just a coincidence?
No, that was the error that I mentioned in the intro, that should be the same. They both should be the same. No funds have changed between CCLA and Investec, so we will correct that for the council version, so they should be the same.
Okay, so the movement in the investing, I'm looking at Mid-Suffolk now. Where did the 3 million come from?
It didn't, there shouldn't have been a 3 million movement in there.
Okay. I'm still puzzled because there's a movement from the prior year to the year we're just considering of 3 million. So where did the 3 million come from?
If I could perhaps help with that one, Councillor. If you look at the CCLA line above and the Investec line below,
Yes.
you'll see there's 3 million on each of those two lines. What Melissa was explaining was that was an error. That 3 million shift shouldn't be there, so CCLA should still be 5 million at the end of 2021, and Investec should still be 2 million at the end of 2021.
Right, got it. Okay. Brilliant, thank you very much. And with regard to the money market fund, I'm not entirely clear from reading the report that we may not have lost money on those funds, and I'd like to understand the advice that was given in regard to that fund and what the costs were for managing it.
Yeah, we do obviously pay broker fees for any investments we make in the money market funds, and obviously the rate that we're getting, you can see at the end, the average rate is 0.01% for investing into, that's the money coming back to us. So we haven't actually lost money, but the returns we're getting are lower than what we would have been experiencing the previous year, for example. So that would be the only negative impact.
So would, a curious point then, would we have paid more in fees than we got in returns?
No, we did. There was a chance at one point where we would be actually paying money to invest in, but they have waived that and they still are at the moment. So they're not charging us to do that. So that's still the case.
Okay, thank you.
Just a clarification, really. It doesn't particularly affect this document, but it might do. When we were on ONS the other day, we had the net figure of the CIFCO return to the council. I think it actually is 0.3. But when we were discussing it, we said it was 3 point. But I think actually the total net to the council is actually 0.3, isn't it?
I think if you have a look at the table on page 29.
I couldn't see it in here, and I just wanted, because we had a bit of discussion about it the other day at ONS, and I queried it in the minutes, and really I just want clarification whether I'm wrong or we've got it wrong in the minutes, but...
I know it's definitely more than 0.3%.
But it did actually say 0.3 on the table when we had it right at the bottom. So when everything was netted down, after all costs, after everything, the net benefit to the council did seem to come in at 0.3, which is why I queried it, because it seemed very low.
Yeah.
Whether that was in the wrong place on the table, and it is actually 3%, if it is 3%, which is what you answered to Catherine,
Yes.
I think I'm happy with that, because that's correct. But it did, I think initially it said on there it was 0.3, which looks particularly bad, which is why I queried it.
Yeah. Well, I'll check the report, because obviously the CIFCO business
Yeah, it's only a matter of reporting.
because that will be going into
I'm rather
council.
hoping that it was wrong with and I'm wrong, and it is actually 3.
Yeah, it's somewhere. I think it's somewhere between 2 and 3%.
Yeah,
but we'll
which
check
is-
that
which is
table in the CIFCO
what you'd
report
be looking
before
for,
it.
what budgeted for.
Yeah.
Right, okay, that's fine. Just a query on that, really.
Do we have any more questions from members, please? No? Then I'd like to open up for debate. Do members like to debate this particular paper?
I don't think there's much to debate, really, as it's only for noting. I'd like to propose that we note it and vote accordingly, as anyone's got any burning questions about debating it. As we've already had questions, I'm not quite sure where we debate.
Well, we don't actually have to vote on this particular item purely because it is for noting. So basically, I'll go through the recommendation. Recommendation 3.1 is that the Treasury management activity for the year 2020 2021 be noted, and that it be noted that performance was in line with the prudential indicator set for 2021. Recommendation 3.2 is that it be noted that both councils' treasury management activity for 2021 was in accordance with the approved treasury management strategy, and that the councils have complied with all the treasury management indicators for this period. So thank you for that. We now move on to item number 8, which is the JAC 21-3 complaints. And I would like to ask Emily Yule if she could present her report, please. Thank you, Emily.
Chair, if I can just ask you to go back to the previous item, I think you might need to actually make a recommendation there to recommend. You might need to vote because it's a recommendation to the councils. So the committee needs to confirm that it is recommending these to the councils to approve.
Okay, apologies for that. Sorry, Councillor Effingham.
Chair, I guess that when we vote on that, that's in taking into account the corrections that have been made, yes? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that would be the case.
Yes, apologies, Chair, I'm now setting that up. So I'm just going to put to agree to the recommendations within the report.
Yes, please, yeah.
Thank you. Councillors, if you'd like to go to the modern.gov app, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Ekpington, 4. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous, 6 votes for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce the Code of Conduct Complaints Monitoring Report for the period 19th of March to the 12th of July 2021. Although there is a slight reduction in the number of complaints compared with the previous reporting period, the time period is shorter for the current report, so the level of complaints received has remained consistently high. The complaints in the Baber district are higher, but tend to be multiple complaints linked to a small number of specific issues. We continue to receive a large number of informal queries and requests for advice from town and parish councils about matters such as casual vacancies, meeting procedures, and declarations of interests. The complaints monitoring information is for noting only. However, I'm also requesting that the committee resolves to receive an annual complaints monitoring report in the future. The current frequency of reporting often means that the committee does not receive a full picture of the whole history of each complaint due to the lifespan of the complaint overlapping reporting periods. Moving to an annual report would help to present a more accurate picture and to enable better comparison between the reporting periods. Committee members are also invited to suggest any additional information they would like to see in the report. Chair, I'm very happy to take any questions, but I will not be able to discuss the details of any individual complaints. Thank you.
Members, do we have any questions for Emily, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. I think I've got more than 2 questions. I don't want to sort of go before other members of the committee. I think the first question I was going to ask Emily was about the marked difference between Baber District Council and Mid Suffolk Council, and was it really thinking about, was it based on one subject or one incident or one issue? But I think you've answered that because you said it did there were a group of complaints. So that's answered my first question. From a practical point of view, how soon are councillors advised that there is a complaint against them?
Thank you for the question. So normally the councillor is advised of the complaint after the initial assessment, which can take up to 4 weeks. And during that initial assessment, what we do is we check that the code is engaged. So is it actually a code of conduct complaint and not a service complaint or a complaint about a procedure, for example. And we also assess other criteria, such as is it a vexatious complaint, is it a repeated complaint, or does it relate to a councillor that's no longer in office, for example. So that's the kind of initial assessment. And at that stage, if we have deemed it a valid code of conduct complaint, the councillor who's been accused of the misdemeanour will be then informed, unless there is a good reason not to inform the councillor at that stage. For example, if it's a potentially a criminal matter, something of that nature, and we need to obviously preserve the investigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at the 4 complaints for Bayborough District Council, I'm not sure whether you can disclose this, but were they public complaints or within the council itself? The complaints made by either other councillors or the general public?
So the complaints around declarations of interest were made by members of the public, and the complaints about the failing to treat others with respect were from councillors towards councillors. However, whoever makes the complaint has no bearing on how we process the complaint. All complainants are treated equally.
So back to the, I picked up the treat others with respect. The question I would ask is, what happens if a councillor, despite being advised to discontinue that behaviour, what happens if they continue to offend?
Thank you. That's a really good question, and it's also one of the kind of more frustrating limitations of the Code of Conduct as it stands at the moment, because, of course, my recommendations are that recommendations. They are not enforceable sanctions. However, if we do make formal recommendations following a Code of Conduct complaint, after a councillor has been found in breach of the code and they fail to comply with those recommendations, we can convene a meeting of the Standards Committee, and the councillor is brought forward to that committee and asked to explain why they failed to fulfil those recommendations, and the committee can make further or impose further sanctions, for example, public censure. Thank you.
I'll keep going. When you advise somebody to make an apology, what assurance do we have that that actually happens?
So for a complaint about a district councillor, it would be my responsibility to ensure that that apology is delivered either in a public apology in a meeting, for example, or a formal written apology, depending on the nature of the incident. For town and parish councils, it usually falls to the clerk to ensure that that apology has been undertaken. But more often than not, if the apology is not given, we hear back from the person who's made the complaint to report back to us that that hasn't happened, and then we would take further steps as I've described, potentially convening a standards committee if required.
Thank you. That just emphasises the importance of the role of the parish clerk, actually, in relation to parish councillors, doesn't it? And sort of the training and support parish clerks get in relation to this sort of incident. In relation to the non-declaration of interest, do you apply that to parish councils? or is it just for the district council? I know in the minutes of a parish council meeting there will be, but if somebody actually has complained that there hasn't been a non-declaration of interest, what would happen after that if it was a parish council? Thank you.
Yeah, so the requirement to declare interests applies to all tiers of local government, so it applies to town and parishes equally as to the district council. So there's two routes really. If it's a non-declaration of a local non-pecuniary interest, there's not really a great deal of impact because that person was still entitled to participate in the meeting and to vote. So in that case, we tend to just offer words of advice and suggest that the parish council might want to take up some training either from ourselves or from the Suffolk Association of Local Councils. If it's a failure to declare a pecuniary interest, potentially there is a criminal offence, so we would need to consider whether the incident would need to be reported to the police. And also we would work with the parish clerk to identify whether that person participating in the meeting, having not declared that pecuniary interest, had any material impact on the outcome of the vote that was taken by the parish council. And we would suggest that the parish clerk, as the proper officer of the council, assesses that and decides whether they need to take any action in terms of revisiting that decision because of the potential impact of somebody who shouldn't have been allowed to participate in that particular item.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for the report. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Eppington, please.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at page 47, 4.4 and 4.5. You've made a recommendation to go to an annual reporting cycle, which seems fine. I just wondered whether you had some idea of how this report, what it's going to look like and what its contents are going to be, and whether you had considered looking at the trend of the different types of complaints that are received year upon year.
Thank you for the question. And Chair, it's absolutely my intention that an annual report would be able to give a much richer set of information to the committee. So we could do a lot more analysis about the trends, the types of complaints. We could report, if the committee so wished, on where the complaints have come from. So is it a member of the public? Is it a member of staff? Is it a fellow councillor? So we could present that kind of analysis as well. And I think what it would give us is a much clearer indication of the kind of life cycle of each complaint, because sometimes the outcome of the complaint is missed in the data that we present to you, because in the first period it hasn't been concluded yet, and in the next period it's not included in the data because it's been closed. So it would give that much clearer sense. I also think it would be able to, we would be able to look at any kind of seasonal nature of the complaints. So, for example, around an election time, you may get more complaints because people are complaining about the campaign, so things like that. And I think it would give the committee that kind of richer sense rather than just a set of figures.
Thank you for that. I just wondered also if you might consider looking at how long it's taken to actually resolve any of these complaints. Thank you.
Thank you. However, I think my question has just been answered from what has been said. Thank you.
I've got to do this. So, apologies if I've missed this point, but am I to understand correctly that apologies for misconduct are not mandatorily public? They can be a private email at the time, but they will eventually come out in the reports. So, is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Councillor. An apology as a recommended sanction doesn't have to be a public apology. It could be a private apology. And sometimes that would be absolutely the right thing to do, depending on the nature of the complaint. If it's a very sensitive complaint, for example. The complaints aren't routinely made public, and particularly the witness statements of the complainant and the councillor providing their evidence, because obviously we need to protect the personal data rights of all involved. But if a complaint does go to the Standards Committee, that of course is public because of the report that goes alongside the committee's consideration, and also any decision notices that we issue are public as well and would be releasable.
Are complaints that are withheld from the public subject to freedom of information requests?
Yes, some parts of the complaints information would be releasable under the Freedom of Information Act.
Thanks. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions at all? Councillor Hurren, please.
Yes, I am on. I wonder, Emily, if you could just be a bit more specific. 10 complaints against Baber councillors, that could be 10 against 1 or 1 against 10. Are you able to put a number on that? Just to give us a feeling, is it just one little outbreak or is it more widely spread, please?
So here again, Chair, there is a division between the complaints received against parish councillors and complaints received against district councillors. The complaints against district councillors tend to be quite individualised, so they are 6 separate complaints against 6 separate councillors, whereas the town and parish complaints tend to be multiple complaints around the same issue. And that could be that, for example, we had one complaint by a single complainant against 8 councillors, and they were all submitted individually, so there were 8 complaints effectively about the same issue. And then there's also complaints that might be made by multiple people against the one councillor for the same issue, if that makes sense, Chair.
Question, but maybe you're not able to, which is fair enough. I just wondered a more specific number of district councillors who were being complained against. If you can't give me that, it'd be nice to know if it's 2, 3 or 5 or 10 singles, just to give us an idea of how widespread it is. I would make the other point, you seem to be asking to move to an annual report, and I'm just wondering, is now the right time to do it? We do seem to have maybe a slight bubble of discontent. I think we should have an annual report. I also think we should keep an eye on this at every meeting. That's my personal feeling, because we need to be ahead of the game, I think. It just seems an annual report is maybe not paying enough attention, but I'm mindful of what other councillors may think, but that is my point of view. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions at all? None at all? We can now go into debate. Do members wish to debate this topic further? Thank you. No? Oh, Councillor Epping-Young and then Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, in the light of the comment from Councillor Hurren, I guess I wondered if we needed to modify the recommendation that was being put before us in terms of the need to review the information at every meeting. It's a bit of a question rather than a debate, but it's just, I don't have any points of debate. I've already made my points.
I just wanted to support what Councillor Hurren was saying about this coming on a regular basis to this committee, because looking at for Baber District Council anyway, I think it's something that we should be looking at in more depth, if that's possible with this committee, or whether it has to go to another committee.
Councillor Barrett, please.
Yeah, I don't think we should get too hung up on the numbers, because clearly, if you look at it, I mean, from a Bay perspective, it looks pretty bad, as if we're a dysfunctional council. But actually what it could mean is we're an active council and we're actually pursuing policies that obviously there are some people who don't like. And actually when you look at it, the majority of those are actually parish council, so nothing to do with us really. And I would probably surmise that the 10 that we get, having had some pretty aggressive and difficult planning decisions recently, I would suggest, and I don't know because obviously I'm not privy to that information, they're probably around that sort of area where you tend to get that, where people get very angry about things and then wang out a letter or a complaint, but really hasn't got any basis. And that does tend to be this, if you look at the upheld complaints, it's very minimal, and I don't know how many of the Babel ones are upheld. So, which is maybe what we could differentiate, so we can see which Babel ones are upheld and which parish ones are upheld, because obviously that just having 7 doesn't give us a clear indication of where there was fault. So maybe that could be a recommendation that we have, that we could see what percentage was upheld against each particular council sector.
For that. Emily, would it be possible, bearing in mind what Councillor Hurren and Councillor McLaren said, that we could still perhaps have our regular report? But you did mention when you were speaking earlier that the end-of-year report will be a much more detailed report, which I would certainly welcome, and I'm sure colleagues would certainly welcome that as well. And perhaps the recommendation could be amended that we continue to receive your regular report in addition to a more substantial annual report. Would you be happy with that? Would members be happy with that? Thank you. Yeah?
Yes, Chair, more than happy to continue with this kind of statistical report on a quarterly basis, and then look for that more analytical and rich annual report to provide that kind of trend data, if you like.
Yeah. I must admit, I would particularly like to see a more substantial annual report. I think that would be quite interesting, and I know members would obviously find that interesting as well. But I do think it's important we are kept up to date with the individual reports as and when we have done so far. So if we could kindly sort of, thank you, Emily, if we could perhaps amend that amendment that we will continue with the regular report in addition to an annual report, and if members are happy with that, could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Epping-Yong and Councillor Barron. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll let the governance officer type that in, and then we will go to the electronic vote. Thank you. I just read the actual recommendation for 3.1 is that the Code of Conduct Complaints Monitoring Information contained in paper JAC 2016 be noted, and the recommendation 3.2 that the Code of Conduct Complaints Monitoring report to be reported to Joint Audit and Standards Committee on an annual basis. We need to vote on that, but also that we will continue with the regular reports that we get. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, excuse me, I've amended that vote just to say to approve the recommendation 3.2 as detailed in the report, amended as agreed.
Thank you very much.
Okay? Are
members happy with that, the proposer and the seconder? Yes. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, Mandy.
So that vote is now in progress.
Thank you.
Councillor Epping-Yong. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm late now, Andy.
Councillor Karen 4. Thank you.
Councillor McLaren.
Chair, can I just raise this? This is just an addendum really about parish. I'm concerned about parish councils, perhaps because one or two incidents that have happened within my own ward, and it's about the support and the training, or lack of it. And I raised it in another meeting actually, and Jan said she would pursue my concern, which was personal to me. But in terms of parish councillors and the work of parish councils, I'm just a bit concerned they're not getting the support that they need. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Make your vote. Councillor Norris. Councillor Norris, are you able to vote on the app, or would you like to give your vote verbally?
Sorry, I can't forward.
Would you like to give your vote verbally? I haven't received your vote on the app. Thank you. That is unanimous. Chair, 7 votes for.
Thank you very much. Which is JAC 21-4, and this is the actual forward plan. Are there any suggestions, comments or amendments to the forward plan from members, please? No? Okay, therefore the audit and standards plans for Baber and Mid Suffolk are noted, and this actually concludes the meeting. The next meeting is currently scheduled for the 27th of September 2021, commencing at 9:30, and I hereby declare the meeting closed at 10:19. Oh, 10:19. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Emily. Thank you.